Hey friends, this is Mark Suroviec, host of the Workplace Solutions podcast, inviting you to discover the joy of work. All right, how are you doing today, Bryn?
I'm good. How are you today, Mark?
Oh, I'm fantastic. How was that lunch?
Oh, it was delicious.
What was on the menu today?
It was it's not going to sound good, but it was like a beet and wild rice, like frozen daily harvest bowl.
Okay. I have never had one of those.
So I'm learning that one of my toxic traits is that I don't like to make decisions, but I also don't like the same thing every day. So like when it comes to meals, there's people that are like, I can't handle it. I'll just eat oatmeal every day. No, I don't want oatmeal every day, but I also don't want to menu plan something different every day. So I have this like meal subscription thing where I play this lunch roulette where I just reach into the freezer and I make something and I never really know what it's going to be.
I like that. That's fun.
Yeah.
I am here today with Bryn Lottig. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It's not my last name. It's my husband's. Their family pronounces it Lottig.
Lottig, excuse me.
Yeah, it's fine.
What should I call you?
Bryn is fine.
Bryn. I'm here with Bryn, who
Yes.
is an EdTech entrepreneur, experience collector, facilitator, and co-founder of the Kikori app. And am I saying Kikori correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be talking about the Kikori story of how that app came to be with the co-founder here. But before we do, let's go ahead and do an icebreaker question. So we're rolling. I've got a fun deck here, and I'm going to choose number 55, a time I got really confused while traveling.
Okay, so recently, this is right before I met you, Mark. I went to the Wilderness Educator Association conference down in Asheville, North Carolina at the end of January. And from there, I went to ACCT. So it was like this multi-city trip. And it's really my first time taking Kikori out into the public since the pandemic. And for some reason, I got it in my head that ACCT was in Cincinnati. And I was really tired from doing WEA. And I had fallen asleep on my flight out of Asheville. And I got to Atlanta, I think is where my connecting flight was. And I like couldn't find the gate for Cincinnati. And then it said that I was going to Cleveland. And I had this exhausted, just waking up from a fog stupor of, oh my God, I'm going to the wrong city. And I was like, should I quick go see if I can get on this flight to Cincinnati? And then I looked up the conference website and I was like, oh no, my hotel is in Cleveland. The conference is in Cleveland. I did book the right flight. I need to put more stock in my past self as opposed to thinking that my present sleep-deprived self really knows what's going on. I got very concerned that I was going to the wrong place, and it all turned out fine.
I love that. I love that. And for folks that aren't in the outdoor or experiential ed industry, ACCT, you've heard me reference on the program several times, is the Association for Challenge Course Technology. I always answer my question, and it's not fair because I have more time to think about it, but I'm going to go with a time earlier in my career. I was a backpacking guide, and I'm just not good with directions in general, which is not
not a quality you want to advertise as a guide.
As a guide. And so I was leading a 5-day trip on the Appalachian Trail. I knew exactly where to go on the trail. I had a great map, but I didn't have a map of the parking lot. And the parking lot and the campground there are gigantic. And so we just walked around for maybe an hour trying to find the actual trailhead to start the trip because I didn't know where it was. I had only been to that site once, and I'm just like, I didn't even think I wouldn't be able to find how to get on the trail. Fast forward, that ends up putting us on our first day late coming into our first camp, and storms coming in. And so I'm just hastily putting up camp and not paying attention to where I'm putting things. And it's raining and I'm cooking dinner under the tarp. And I realize like the river, the little creek next to me is slowly turning into a river.
Oh dear.
And I'm there with my little Whisper Light stove trying to cook the meal for the kids. And the water is just slowly rising. And eventually, like I'm sitting in maybe 6 inches of water, and the water rises enough to just take the flame off the stove. So dinner was ready, whether it was fully cooked or not.
Oh gosh.
But it was miserable. It was just all because I got lost in the parking lot.
All the best disaster stories are just like these micro things that go wrong.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get into Kikori and what is that, why don't you, Bryn, tell us a little bit about your background? So what do you do and how did you get to where you are?
I started flying airplanes when I was 14. I got my private pilot certification before I graduated from high school. Went to college fully intending to learn how to be a professional pilot. And just a few weeks into my freshman year was 9/11. So not having a lot of direction after that, I went on an outward bound trip and did Colorado outward bound school, 15 days of whitewater rafting and backpacking in Dinosaur National Monument, and fell in love with expeditionary travel. It was not something that I had any exposure to growing up. My family did not camp or enjoy experiencing the wilderness in that way. And I really had this, what I have found to be a common outward bound alumni experience of transformation. And there was a program in my college that took students abroad, but they traveled with their professors. And so I did Australia and New Zealand for 4 months, traveling every 3 days with my professors, studying outdoor pursuits and adventure travel, adventure tourism. And I loved that. And so went home, graduated. My undergrad is in rec and tourism with a minor in adventure tourism. And afterwards was guiding expeditionary trips, canoeing, kayaking, backpacking with youth. Met my husband and had to settle down. So he is a research scientist for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he runs a remote research station in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. Remote meaning far away from urban areas, not that it's fully online. That word has changed meaning in the last 3 years for sure. But with his station here in the Northwoods, I found a YMCA camp and started working in their leadership program. Their leadership manual was written by Laurie Frank, and it put into words all the things that I had experienced myself that had been implicit but not explicit. And I found myself really loving the challenge course and challenge course work. So after having a couple of babies, I went and got my master's in adventure-based experiential education, working for a public school now, currently in the Northwoods, and I lead their adventure program. So I run adventures for 4K through 8th grade 3 times a year or once a trimester. And I have a fully scaffolded program working with 3 and 4-year-olds for just a couple hours doing a little hike, and we come upon a tent in the woods and we climb inside and we pretend to snore and we read a story and we go outside and we play some games and we hike back and we talk about the school's principles of curiosity, craftsmanship, and grit, and how it relates to the outdoors and how they can apply that in the classroom. But then with my 7th and 8th graders, we do overnight. And we've got cross-country skis and snowshoes. We do an ice fishing event. So we've really taken advantage of the place that we're in. While I was in grad school, I met my co-founder and we started an EdTech startup at the same time I started working for this school. And then I also still work for Camp Manito-wish on their challenge course.
So let's transition to Kikori and meeting your co-founder. So what is Kikori and how did it come to be?
I met my co-founder in grad school, and part of the program was a 2-week backpacking trip. And she was a social worker in the Chicago public schools for about 6 years before I met her. And she was really into experiential education and just felt like the classroom teachers could use it, but her as the social worker didn't have the sort of agency to implement it on a larger scale. And she was trying to make her own little key ring of icebreakers and team builders. And in my practice at Camp Manito-wish, we have a recipe box of laminated cards with all the different activities. And she was just like, gosh, I wish this was an app. All through our grad program, she kept talking about it. And when we went on this backpacking trip, her and I shared a tent. And I was just like, yeah, I think that would be great. Challenge course facilitators for anybody working in the facilitation field to just be able to pull it up on our phones and to have a filter. Just like, I was like, oh yeah, like REI, you can search by size, you can search by color, you can search by brand or material. And I was obsessed with the REI app's filter system and how they manage their inventory. And I was like, yeah, if we can make activities inventory and search them. And she was like, yeah, but it's really important to me that this isn't just for people in our field. I really want to get more experiential education into classrooms. And I was like, yeah. And eventually she won me over. And that was when I started working with the school that I'm working for now. And I was like, okay, once I really got involved inside that brick and mortar system and understood more of the intricacies of what education looks like, I was like, yeah, we absolutely need to make this more easily deliverable to educators. That the pedagogy around experiential learning is so foreign to them that there needs to be a sense of serving it on that silver platter and making it really explicit.
Can you define that term that non-educators might not be familiar with? Pedagogy.
It's the foundational teaching structure. And so a lot of educators teach the way they were taught. And some common criticism of the education system is that a teacher stands in front of the room and the way the student learns is called sit and get. So they sit there and they get the information told to them. They're expected to retain it and regurgitate it on a test. And it doesn't follow the experiential learning cycle. So the experiential learning cycle is an active experience where the student participates in some sort of learning, and then they reflect on that experience. They connect that experience to other areas in their life, and then they use that information to apply it to their life moving forward. And for those in the facilitation or experiential world, we talk a lot about debriefing and how debriefing is what happened. So what are you going to do with it? And now what? And how are you going to use that moving forward? And at Kikori, we say that it is a more thought out cycle in that there is prep. There's then the play, which is the active experimentation, if you will, connect, reflect, and then grow. On the Kikori platform, every activity that has its own activity card has prep, play, reflect, connect, and grow.
Nice. And just as a reminder for folks, if they want further information on the experiential learning cycle, we covered that in episode 12. So Rhonda and I chatted about that in depth. And right before this episode comes out, we have 2 episodes with Rhonda on the 8 R's of leading an activity, which corresponds with the Kikori method that Bryn just talked about. All right. Cool. You've talked about where Kikori came from. What were some of the challenges in starting the business and launching the app?
The biggest challenge was, first of all, we're 2 educators who didn't have any money. And so the first iteration of our app, which is called the minimum viable product or the MVP, basically it's just a wireframe or a generalized structure of what we thought it would be. But that that was built in exchange for English lessons with these Spanish-speaking developers. My partner was living in Santiago, and we didn't know how to develop an app, and we didn't have any money. So we found these really great young professionals that wanted to be competitive in a global market, but didn't have good English, but great development skills. So we started partnering with them, and they got headhunted. One is at Groupon and one is at Facebook now. But we built our MVP in exchange for English lessons. And then we launched our beta, or our like test product, on March 2nd of 2020. Yeah. Right?
I'm sorry. This is your baby, and I'm laughing.
No, it's hilarious. It's ridiculous. But we thought we would put this beta out into the world for all these classroom teachers that would come home from spring break, use it the remainder of the school year, then give us feedback so that we could adjust it over the summer and deploy it into schools in the fall of 2020. And it's just ridiculous now.
If you're listening 50 years into the future, that was pretty much a day before the global pandemic of COVID-19 started. So.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks. Yeah. And the shelter in place, the lockdowns happened, and nobody came back to school in person. And then camps who we had thought would use it, nobody was running. So our early plans for traction and testing and development went out the window, but we had some really beautiful opportunities where folks from the University of New Hampshire, outdoor ed students, helped us take a bunch of activities and quickly modify them for virtual and physical distancing. And we got our first batch of activities on the app with the help of those students. And we launched our actual product in January of 2021. Not too late, but it launched in the middle of the school year on just mobile apps, and then the web app version that can be accessed via a desktop came out in March of 2021. So at this point, we're just passing our 1 year on the market and getting some of our annual data so that we can analyze that. But yeah, some of the challenges in starting a business are you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes I think it's funny because looking back, if I knew everything I know now, I'm not confident I would have still done it. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity and the optimism and the support from my partner, where startups are hard. Startups during a pandemic are crazy, but it's also kept us really excited.
I'm curious if you'll speak to what it was like fundraising and getting capital and investors, because that's a part of my business that I've decided not to do. My promise to my wife was I'm not going into debt. So we'll go at whatever pace we need to build workplace solutions. So I don't have that experience and haven't done that. So what was that like for you?
Kendra and I were fully self-funded until 4 months ago. We retained 50-50 ownership and have been self-funded up until this last January when we took on our first round of investment. And basically we were getting traction. And it's funny because I think when we started this project, I didn't envision myself as a business owner. I was like, oh, this is just a really interesting thing. And we have kept succeeding enough to keep taking the next step forward. It's fantastic, but it's definitely interesting when you get the outside investment. Our bank account doesn't keep me up at night the way that it used to, but it's a completely different kind of stress spending other people's money than your own. You know, we got lots and lots of feedback to not take on investment and to go as long as you can without it. And then some people were like, oh, go after VC, which is venture capitalists. Currently, our investors are angel investors. We find a lot of success with impact investment, which is becoming more trendy. But we are a public benefit corporation. It's walking the line between that nonprofit and for-profit, but the public benefit distinction allows us to make decisions that address our social impact mission as opposed to financing the bottom line. And all of our investors understand that. And so many of them are past educators or have a loved one in education. And so they see the need for a product like ours to get into the market. And so that is very reassuring and encouraging. It's very validating to have other people give us their money and say, you're doing good work.
Yeah, I can empathize with that idea. I remember the first time my business got paid to do an actual project or job, and I was like, okay, this isn't just ethereal anymore. This isn't, I have skills and people should give me money.
Yeah,
it's this is real now, and it feels different.
We've entered competitions and we've been given awards. We've had introductions and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm sure you've done bits on imposter syndrome, but it's like, I think other people think I'm a professional.
Oh, you
are.
You are.
It's like when they give you your child, and I'm like, when are the real grown-ups coming? I'm not qualified to raise this baby.
Oh, but that's a good
Kendra
comparison.
and I say all the time that this is the most meta experiential team building initiative we've ever partaken in, and we call it our entrepreventure.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. So you referenced your mission for the app and the service and what you're trying to do. So what is that mission or vision for the future?
Our mission is to democratize access to experiential education. So Too often we feel that only those that can afford it have access to really immersive types of education. And we see it happening in affluent areas where they're going on field trips or having experiences, whether it be in the wilderness or not. But there's so much learning that takes place outside of just that sit and get model. And so to have that opportunity to really reflect on what you're learning and integrate it into your life is something that we don't think should be limited to just the folks that are not bound by maybe public school mandates and rules, but that the reason that a lot of teachers aren't teaching in this manner is that they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, and they haven't been taught how to teach in this way.
They don't have that image that there is a better way, and the barrier to entry is often high. Is that what I'm hearing?
Okay. Yeah.
I love that. I support that mission fully. I love what y'all are doing. It reminds me of a small conference event that we put on down here in Georgia called the Georgia Facilitator Summit, which is just a small open space event for facilitators. And the idea was it costs the price of lunch. So it's a full day event. I think it's $20, $25, something like that. That's a professional conference at the cost of, I guess that's more than one lunch, but
yeah.
But that was the idea, that you could have students and folks who didn't have as much resources, that their company couldn't send them to an AEE or an ACCT or an AO or one of those conferences. I've been a part of that since we started a few years ago. So if you are in the Southeast, a shout out to the Georgia Facilitator Summit.
Ew.
Tell us of a time where you were leading a group of people from either a program you were leading or a training, and you saw transformation. So what happened?
Actually, it was really interesting. I do the professional development for a lot of the school districts up here, and I led as a litmus test activity, which I know has been a phrase that has been used, an indicator of an activity that you're walking into this existing intact group to see where they're at in their group development. But I did helium poll with a group of grownups, teachers, educators that live in my community. And I watched the librarian swear at the principal storm off, and people have like complete meltdowns. As a litmus test activity, it told me everything I needed to know, like right off the bat. So being able to address some of the underlying tensions and assumptions that were going on was really amazing. So they did a full 3-day immersive staff retreat, and it's not just for leadership staff, it is for everyone. So paras are included, as well as classroom teachers, specials teachers, admin, everybody was there. And it's really great to watch not only like how the group progressed during those 3 days of that retreat, but to see the way that they felt prepared to start the school year with students and how confident they were in that scenario. And full disclosure is that I open enroll my kids to that school because of their commitment to that sort of process, to the team building from just like every level, participating, having this shared experience, to really being vulnerable, giving of themselves, and trying to create a higher functioning team.
That's great. And if you're not familiar with the helium pole, helium stick activity, you basically have a tent pole or something similar, and you're trying to lower it to the ground with everyone having a finger on it, and it is much more challenging than it sounds.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Who is someone that helped you or supported you in your career? What did they do? And let's thank them by name.
There's a number of folks that come to mind. And really the thing about Kikori is that we are attempting to curate a lot of voices in our industry and put them in one place that we can search. And when Kendra and I started this process, we didn't view ourselves as content creators or activity authors. We said, I'm not going to publish a book full of activities. I just want to help curate the space. And the people who have just been instrumental in my understanding of experiential education and experiential learning, adventure learning, outdoor education. It starts with Mark Zanoni, who hired me at Camp Manito-wish and was the leadership director there for a long time, but very influential in the teams conference that happened for a number of years here in the Midwest. But also Laurie Frank, whose words gave voice to my experience. And then in later years, working with her directly, her journey to the Caring Classroom book and her professional development is something that we have integrated into Kikori. Chris Cavert was one of our very first thought partners on the platform and has given us unlimited access to any of his content because he believes in our mission. Jen Stanchfield has been integral with some of the ethics and theory behind who do we attribute each activity to, because there's such an oral tradition in our field. Where did this come from and how does that fit together with what we know? She worked intimately with Karl Rohnke, and we just value her understanding and her knowledge of the space. So much of what we're currently trying to do is based on standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'm just honored to be able to spend time with folks like Michelle Cummings and Mark Collard, any of our other content contributors, just the things that they've done in the field and for the field. It's really inspirational, and that they are trusting of Kendra and me and our team to be able to represent that content in a way that shares it with the greater community is very inspiring and humbling.
Awesome. And I certainly am nowhere close to those giants, but I did put my first activity on the app yesterday. So.
I know. Sarah texted me this morning and she put a message out to the whole team and she was like, who knows this guy? And I was like, ooh, that one's me. I said, I know that one.
Awesome. I put postmodern rock, paper, scissors on
Yes.
there. So that's a pretty fun one. I think we have time for this. Spin the wheel of embarrassing moments. Tell us a story of professional failure where you screwed up and what did you learn from it?
You know, of all the questions that could have been skipped.
You are not mandated to answer any questions.
One that I have been thinking about and shared somewhere else recently upon some professional reflection is I was leading a group from a local bank through some leadership activities, and we were doing turnstiles. And because there were so many of them, we broke them up into groups and we did some activities. And so this activity, I was running turnstiles for, I guess, to be explicit, is that it is like a jump rope activity. So there are 2 rope turners, and it's a retired climbing rope. And the entire team is on one side of the rope. And the objective is to get the team on the other side of the rope without the rope stopping turning. Well, I made an assumption that they were adults and that it was going to be okay. I had a woman, and you can get through the turnstile, you can get through the rope without actually having to jump over it. If you time it correctly, you run under the rope. But she did it with her hands in her pockets, and she tripped and fell and got banged up and had to go to urgent care. And I felt just awful that I didn't catch that she had her hand in her pockets. I mean, it was the level 1, but yeah, so I felt really bad about that. She ended up being fine, but it definitely left like a bad taste in my mouth for the rest of the day that somebody had gotten hurt during one of my programs.
It actually reminds me of a colleague of mine. I won't say his name, but it rhymes with and it was his first day facilitating a marriage program, and the married couples were doing the turnstile, and he made a joke about carrying your spouse underneath it, and one of them like pulled his back and ate it and dropped it his wife, and it was just he's like, I broke a couple on my first day. I'm like, you did. So I shouldn't be laughing. It's not funny, but
yeah, we all do things that we regret, and it's funny because part of our zipline spiel is, the most dangerous thing that you've done today is driving here in a car. That's much more dangerous than actually participating in the zipline. But lo and behold, I had somebody fall down walking.
So what is one question you haven't been asked that you are burning to answer?
This might not be what you intended.
Whatever you share is fine.
What is the difference between a hippo and a Zippo?
I don't know.
One weighs a ton and the other's a little lighter.
I can honestly say, Bryn, you are the first person to tell a dad joke in response to that question. And I don't know if there's a way to give you a podcast award, but I think you just earned it. Now, that the origin of that question, I had a professor in grad school that on our final exam, one of the questions was, tell me something you know about this subject that you want me to know that you know.
Oh.
And almost no one answered it because it was just too wide open. And I did. I was like, I just want to talk about this, and got an A on that section. But
nice.
That just is a very memorable question. So I've tried to incorporate that. So thank you, Dr. Petitpas. Final thoughts, and where can people find you?
I guess final thoughts are just that Kikori is for everybody. We meet the educator or the facilitator where they are at. It is a mix of, liken it to Spotify or Epicurious, that it has your favorites, but also some new and interesting takes on favorites, or maybe some activities that you've never heard of. So I love that it brings together all these voices. So not just some heavy hitters or luminaries in our field, but folks from outside of our field that are doing amazing things. And it'll spice up your facilitation, or even just help you organize, because you can organize activities into playlists or curated sequences of activities, or just collections of activities. But there is a free version, so you can access the free version and learn all that you need to know using the free trial. And if that's not for you, just stay on the free version. There's a paid individual, but there's also a group membership that offers a whole bunch of additional features on the back end, including data and logins and closed sharing networks and administrative type features. So happy at any time to talk through that, give live demos. We do have live demos that you can drop into throughout the rest of this semester. They will not be happening over the summer, but we've got a couple other webinars and events to keep up with us. We have a newsletter sign up on our website, and we're on all the socials. The website is kikoriapp.com, Kikori, and it's @Kikori app on all the socials. My email is Bryn, Bryn, @kikoriapp.com. And I guess the other thing that I would love to be able to share is the origin story of our name. Kikori is the longest undammed river in Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is the most linguistically diverse place in the world. And there's a quote that I love about how no human steps in the same river twice, for the river is always changing, and so is the person. And I feel that that is how activities are. You can run the same activity 10 times and it'll always be different because you and your participants are either changing or maturing, and there's always something to learn from that. And so we named it after the Kikori River, and Amazon was already taken. So.
That's fair. That's fair. I meant to ask this earlier. The two activities that we discussed, turnstile and helium stick or helium pole, are those on the app?
Yes, they both are on the app.
So we didn't even have to describe them.
No,
you
can
just go to the app.
all the instructions that you need at your fingertips for prep, play, reflect, connect, and grow.
Love it. Do you want to give a shout out to Kendra?
I do. Kendra Bostick is my fearless co-founder, and her bottomless optimism and intense drive is the only reason that we still exist as a company. So she's currently at the University of New Hampshire getting her PhD so that we can build out an assessment tool, and she's absolutely brilliant.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Bryn. And by proxy, thank you, Kendra. I've been playing in the Kikori app all this week in preparation, and I'm digging it. It's a good product. Thank you, Bryn. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark.
Life is way too short for work to suck. So if you want help to build your team, train your team, or manage your team, we're here. Come see us at workplaysolutions.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Exciting. I just lost my notes. Here, give me a second.